They built a luxury neighborhood on my land, and never thought I'd find out. I came out here for peace, not a fight. Thought I'd inherited nothing but a broken cabin and a quiet lake. Then an HOA president showed up telling me I didn't own my own water. That's when something didn't sit right. So I started digging, and what I found changed everything. Stick with me, because this one doesn't end the way they expected. And if you respect stories about standing your ground the right way, consider subscribing. You're gonna want to see what happens next. I didn't expect peace to feel this loud. The first morning I woke up at the cabin. The silence hit harder than anything I'd left behind. No traffic bleeding through thin apartment walls. No neighbors yelling. No phone buzzing with overdue invoices or my ex-wife's lawyer reminding me what I no longer owned. Just wind moving across water. I stood on the edge of the lake, boots planted in damp soil that hadn't seen a footprint in years, and watched the surface ripple under early light. 2,400 acres of it. My name on paper now. Ethan Cole, landowner. It didn't feel real yet. 3 weeks ago, I was fixing breaker panels in cramped condos outside Denver, counting dollars like they were running out. Then a call came from a lawyer I barely remembered. Your uncle left you something. I almost didn't go, figured it was a debt, not an inheritance. But now I was here. Colorado backcountry. Pine trees thick enough to swallow sound. A cabin that looked like it had survived 3 lifetimes and refused to apologize for it. And this lake, wide, quiet, stubborn, mine. At least, that's what the paperwork said. I was halfway through replacing a warped plank on the dock when I heard tires crunching gravel behind me. Slow, deliberate. Not the kind of sound you get out here unless someone meant to be seen. I turned. White SUV. Too clean for this road. Too expensive for this place. It stopped about 20 feet from the cabin, engine idling like it didn't trust the silence either. The door opened, and she stepped out like she was walking onto a stage. Vanessa Holloway. I didn't know her name yet, but everything about her said control. Mid-50s, sharp posture, blonde hair locked in place like it had its own rules to follow. White blazer, sunglasses, heels that sank slightly into the gravel but didn't slow her down. She walked straight toward me without hesitation, like she'd been here before. Are you Ethan Cole? She asked. Her voice carried. Clean, precise, the kind of voice used to being obeyed. I set the hammer down on the dock rail. Depends who's asking. She didn't smile, just reached into a leather folder and pulled out a stack of papers thick enough to matter. Vanessa Holloway, president of the Millbrook Estates Homeowners Association. She said it like I was supposed to recognize the title, like it explained everything. It didn't. She extended the papers toward me without stepping onto the dock. Like crossing that line required permission she wasn't willing to ask for. You've inherited a property that falls within the jurisdiction of our managed water system, she continued. There are several immediate compliance issues that need to be addressed. I took the papers. Violation notice. The words were bold, printed like they carried weight. I flipped through the first page, then the second. It read like a language designed to confuse and corner at the same time. Unauthorized shoreline usage. Non-compliant dock structure. Unregulated access to community water. I looked up at her. Community water, I said, glancing past her toward the lake. You mean this one? Her gaze didn't follow mine. She already knew where it was. Yes, she said. Millbrook Estates maintains shared usage rights to this body of water. It's been part of our community infrastructure for over a decade. I let that sit for a second. Wind brushed across the lake again, pushing a line of ripples toward the dock. The sound was soft, steady, like it had been doing this long before either of us showed up. I think you've got the wrong property, I said. Vanessa tilted her head slightly, like she'd heard that before. No, she replied. I don't. She tapped the top page with one manicured finger. You have 30 days to bring this structure into compliance, she said, or we'll proceed with enforcement. That includes fines, access restrictions, and, if necessary, coordinated action with the county. Coordinated action, I repeated. That's a nice way of saying what? Demolition, she said without hesitation. At your expense. I stared at her. There was no bluff in her tone. No hesitation. Just certainty. Like she'd already done this before. I looked back down at the papers. The numbers at the bottom caught my eye. Initial fine, $3,500. Daily penalties thereafter. I exhaled slowly. 3 weeks ago, that number would have wrecked me. Now I was standing on land worth more than I'd ever touched in my life, and someone was telling me I didn't have the right to use it. Let me get this straight, I said, folding the papers once. You're telling me this lake, I pointed behind me, isn't mine. I'm telling you, Vanessa said, that ownership and usage are not the same thing. And in this case, usage is regulated by Millbrook Estates. Her eyes flicked past me for the first time, scanning the shoreline, the dock, the cabin. You'll also need to address the condition of the structure, she added. It reflects poorly on the surrounding community. I followed her gaze. Rough wood, faded paint, a dock that had seen better decades. It wasn't pretty, but it was solid, and it was mine. Funny, I said. I didn't see any community when I got here. Vanessa's lips tightened just enough to show I'd stepped somewhere she didn't like. We're just beyond the tree line, she said. 300 homes, private roads, managed utilities. This lake is central to all of it. 300 homes. I felt something shift in my chest. Not panic. Not yet. Something sharper. Then why don't I see any of them? I asked. Because we value privacy, she said. And because, until now, your uncle understood how things worked. That word landed heavier than the rest. Uncle. I didn't know much about him, just that he'd lived out here alone. That the family didn't talk about him much. That the lawyer had sounded almost relieved to hand everything off. What exactly did he understand? I asked. Vanessa didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her folder again and pulled out a second document. Thinner, more official looking. Final notice, she said, handing it over. 30 days. After that, we escalate. I took it, but my attention was already drifting past her again. The lake stretched out, calm as ever. No signs, no markers, no fences. Nothing that said it belonged to anyone but the land itself. And yet, 300 homes depended on it. Vanessa stepped back toward her SUV. I suggest you don't make this difficult, Mr. Cole, she said. These situations tend to resolve much faster when people understand their position. And what position is that? I asked. She opened the driver's door, paused just long enough to look back at me. The one where you don't have as much control as you think. Then she got in, shut the door, and drove off the way she came, tires carving fresh lines into gravel that hadn't asked for them. I stood there for a long time after the engine noise faded. The papers felt heavier in my hand now. Violation, compliance, enforcement, words built to push. I walked to the edge of the dock again and looked out across the water. Still quiet, still steady, still mine. At least that's what I thought. But one question kept circling in my head, louder than the silence around me. Why would an HOA risk claiming a private lake unless they believed they could get away with it? That question stayed with me longer than it should have. The next morning, I didn't start with the dock. I started with the shoreline. I walked the perimeter slowly, boots crunching over dry pine needles and loose gravel, keeping my eyes on the water instead of the cabin behind me. If Vanessa Holloway was telling the truth, or even half of it, there had to be signs. Something that proved this lake wasn't as isolated as it looked. At first, there was nothing, just trees, rock, water. Then I found the first cut. It wasn't obvious. A narrow break in the brush about a quarter-mile east of the dock, just wide enough for someone to drag equipment through if they knew where they were going. The ground was compacted, worn smooth in a way that didn't happen naturally. I followed it. 50 yards in, the trees thinned just enough to expose a small wooden platform sitting low against the shoreline. Weathered, but maintained. Fresh screws in old boards. A rope tied to a post that hadn't been there more than a year. A dock. Not mine. I stood there for a second, letting that settle in. Someone had built this. Recently. And not in a way that suggested they were worried about permission. I crouched down, ran a hand along the edge of the wood. Clean cuts, measured spacing. Whoever put this together knew what they were doing. This wasn't trespassing, this was infrastructure. I straightened up and looked out over the water. That's when I saw the second one. Farther down the shoreline, partially hidden behind a cluster of rocks. Smaller, but built the same way. Same pattern, same materials. I kept walking. By the time I looped back toward the cabin, I'd counted 5. 5 separate access points, all tucked just far enough into the trees to stay out of sight, unless you were looking for them. Or unless you already knew they were there. The lake wasn't empty. It had just been hiding. I was cutting back through the main path when I heard an engine behind me. Old this time. Not polished. Not quiet. A pickup. I stepped out onto the open stretch near the cabin just as a faded blue truck rolled into view. Tires kicking up dust like it belonged there. The driver slowed when he saw me, then killed the engine without shutting it off completely. The door opened with a creak. Tom Alvarez climbed out. Late 50s, maybe early 60s. Sun-beaten face, work boots that had seen years, not months. He took one look at me, then at the papers still sitting on my porch rail, and nodded like he'd already figured out what kind of morning I'd had. "You the new owner?" he asked. "Depends who's asking," I said, repeating yesterday without meaning to. That earned me a half-smile. "Tom Alvarez," he said. "Place just past the ridge. Other side of those trees." He pointed vaguely west. Figured I'd come introduce myself before someone else did it worse. I glanced at the lake behind him. "Let me guess. HOA. Tom's smile faded. "Vanessa came by already, didn't she?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. He exhaled through his nose and walked a few steps closer, stopping just short of the porch like he understood boundaries better than most. "She tell you it's community water?" he asked. "Something like that." Tom nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said. "That's what she tells everyone who doesn't know better." I crossed my arms. "And you?" "I know better." That got my attention. Tom glanced toward the tree line, like he was checking who might be listening, then lowered his voice just enough to make it feel deliberate. "They've been using that lake for years," he said. "Long before you showed up." "How?" I asked. "There's no access road, no public entry." He jerked his thumb back over his shoulder. "There is if you build it quiet." I thought about the docks, the cut paths, those platforms out there, I said. "You seen them?" "All of them," Tom replied. "There's more than you found, too." "How many? Depends how deep you go." That didn't sit right. "They got permission?" I asked. Tom gave me a look that answered before he spoke. If they did, he said, you wouldn't be standing here holding violation notices. I let that hang. The wind shifted slightly, carrying the smell of water and something else beneath it. Metal, maybe. Faint, but there. Vanessa said this has been part of their system for over a decade, I said. Tom laughed, but there was no humor in it. Vanessa says a lot of things, he replied. Doesn't make them true. Then why hasn't anyone stopped it? That question hit something. Tom looked away for a second, eyes drifting toward the lake like he was weighing how much to say. Your uncle tried, he said finally. I felt that land harder than I expected. Tried what? Same thing you're thinking about, Tom said, pushing back, asking questions, digging into paperwork. And? Tom shook his head. They buried him in fines, inspections, legal letters, made it more expensive to fight than to ignore. I glanced back at the stack of violations on the porch. That part made sense. Did he ever sign anything? I asked. No, Tom said immediately. That's the one thing he never did. That mattered. Then how are they still using it? I pressed. Tom's jaw tightened. Because nobody proved they couldn't. That answer sat wrong in my chest. Not because it didn't make sense, because it did. Too much. Show me, I said. Tom raised an eyebrow. Show you what? Where it all leads, I replied. The docks, the paths, whatever you think I haven't seen yet. He studied me for a second, like he was deciding if I was serious or just another guy about to get worn down. Then he nodded. Get in, he said, jerking his head toward the truck. We drove in silence for a while, the kind that doesn't need filling. Tom took us off the main path, cutting through a narrow trail that felt more like something used regularly than something recently discovered. Branches brushed the sides of the truck, leaving faint scratches that didn't seem to bother him. After about 10 minutes, the trees opened up just enough to reveal something I hadn't expected. A clearing. Not natural. Flattened ground. Gravel spread out in uneven patches. Tire tracks, fresh ones, cutting in and out like veins. And at the far edge, half hidden behind a line of low brush, was the thing that made everything click. A pipe. 6 inches wide, maybe more. Painted dull blue, running straight out of the ground near the lake's edge and disappearing back into the trees on the other side. I stepped out of the truck before it fully stopped. What the hell is that? I asked. Tom didn't answer right away. He just walked up beside me, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on the pipe like he'd been waiting for me to see it myself. That, he said finally, is why Vanessa Holloway knocked on your door. I took a few steps closer, crouched down, and touched the metal. Cold. Solid. Active. Waterline? I asked. Tom nodded. Feeds most of Millbrook Estates, he said. Houses, irrigation, pools, everything. I looked back at the lake, then at the pipe, then at the ground beneath my boots. My land, I said quietly. Tom didn't correct me. I stood there, doing the math without numbers. 300 homes, 1 lake, 1 pipe, and not a single mention of permission in anything Vanessa had handed me. I straightened slowly. If they built all this, I said, more to myself than to him. Tom finished the thought. Where's the legal permission? The answer was already starting to take shape, and I had a feeling I wasn't going to like it. Or maybe I was, because if they didn't have it, Then everything they'd built out there, every dock, every pipe, every drop of water running through that line, was sitting on something they didn't own. And for the first time since Vanessa Holloway stepped out of that white SUV, I wasn't confused anymore. I was paying attention. And the moment you start paying attention, people like Vanessa Holloway don't slow down. They push harder. It started early the next morning. I was halfway through replacing a breaker panel inside the cabin when I heard another engine come up the gravel road. Not smooth like Vanessa's SUV. Heavier. Slower. Government issue. I stepped out onto the porch just as a county truck rolled to a stop in front of the cabin. White. Faded decals. Door hanging just a little crooked. The kind of vehicle that didn't show up unless someone called it. The driver stepped out with a clipboard already in hand. Dale Whitaker. I didn't know his name yet, but I recognized the posture. Slightly hunched, like he'd rather be anywhere else but not enough to leave. "Ethan Cole?" he asked. "Yeah." He nodded once, flipped a page on his clipboard, and walked toward me like he'd rehearsed this part. "County inspection," he said. "We received multiple reports regarding code violations on this property." I leaned against the porch rail. "Multiple reports," I repeated. "Let me guess. Came in yesterday?" Dale didn't look up. "I just respond to what's filed," he said. That was answer enough. He handed me a stack of papers thicker than the one Vanessa left. I didn't take them right away. "What am I looking at?" I asked. "Initial assessment," he said. "You've got a 60-day window to correct all listed issues before escalation." "Escalation meaning?" He hesitated. "Fines. Liens. Possible property action." That last one hung there. Property action. Different words, same meaning Vanessa used. "Take it from you." I took the papers. 14 separate violations. Electrical system non-compliant. Septic not up to current code. Structural instability. Improper land use classification. Water runoff mismanagement. Each line had a number next to it. By the time I got to the bottom, the total sat just under $50,000. $47,200. I let out a short breath through my nose. "That's impressive," I said. "You always find this much wrong on a place you've never seen before?" Dale shifted his weight. "I go by what's reported." "And what's reported," I said, flipping the top page, "just happens to line up with everything that would make it impossible for me to stay here." He didn't answer. Didn't need to. "Walk me through it," I said. Dale looked up then, surprised. "Excuse me?" "You're here," I said. "Might as well show me what's wrong." For a second, I thought he might push back. Then something in his expression changed. Not confidence, not authority, resignation. "Fine," he said. We started with the electrical. I led him inside, flipped open the panel I'd just finished working on. "Upgraded wiring," I said. "GFCI outlets where they're supposed to be. Grounding is clean." Dale glanced at it, then back at his sheet. "Reported as unpermitted work," he said. "Is it unsafe?" He paused. "No." "Then why is it a violation?" He didn't answer that either. We moved to the septic. He walked around the side of the cabin, kicked at the soil near the tank cover. "System's old," he said. "So am I replied. "Doesn't mean it's failing." He flipped another page. Listed as non-compliant. "Is it leaking?" "No." "Is it failing inspection?" He hesitated again. "No." I nodded slowly. "So it's not broken," I said. "It's just not new." Dale scratched the back of his neck. "Codes change," he said. "Convenient," I replied. We went through the rest the same way. Roof aged but stable. Foundation solid, just not pretty. Land usage classified under something that didn't make sense for a property this size. Every violation had the same pattern. Not dangerous. Not urgent. Just expensive. By the time we circled back to the porch, Dale looked like he'd run out of things to justify. "You got anything here that actually needs fixing today?" I asked. He stared at the clipboard for a long moment. Then he lowered it. "Look," he said quietly. "Off the record. This is heavy." "Heavy?" I repeated. "Yeah," he said. "More than usual. Someone wants movement on this property." There it was. Not law, not safety. Pressure. "Vanessa Holloway," I said. Dale didn't confirm it. He didn't have to. "What happens if I don't pay?" I asked. He exhaled. "Fine stack," he said. "County can place a lien." After that, he trailed off. "After that," I finished, "you make it expensive enough that I leave." Dale looked at me like I'd just said something he wasn't supposed to hear out loud. "I just do inspections," he said. "Yeah," I replied, "and someone else decides where they point you." He didn't argue, didn't defend it. Just walked back to his truck, slower than when he arrived. Before he got in, he stopped. 60 days, he said without turning around. "That's what the paper says." Then he drove off. I stood there with the stack of violations in my hand, feeling the weight of it settle in. Not fear, not yet. Recognition. I'd seen this before. Different setting, same tactic. Overwhelm the target, stack pressure, make the cost of fighting higher than the cost of surrender. Only this time, they picked the wrong property. Because while Dale was handing me paperwork, I already knew what was running under my land. That pipe, that water, that entire neighborhood leaning on something they didn't own. I walked back inside the cabin and set the violation notices on the table. Then I pulled out the map I'd found in the trunk the night before. Old, folded, edges worn soft from being handled too many times. I spread it flat. Property lines, survey markings, notes in handwriting that wasn't mine, my uncle's. I traced one line with my finger, then another. The pipe Tom showed me, if this map was right, it didn't just cross the edge of the property. It cut straight through the middle of it. Deep, meaning everything connected to it. Every house, every yard, every community-managed drop of water ran through me first. I leaned back in the chair and stared at the map. Vanessa Holloway didn't come here by accident. She came here fast. Too fast. Because she knew something. And whatever it was, she didn't want me to figure it out. Which meant I was already closer than she expected. And if they were willing to throw $50,000 in fake violations at me just to push me off this land, then whatever they were protecting had to be worth a hell of a lot more. I didn't wait. That same afternoon, I drove into town. Madison County wasn't much. One main street, a courthouse that looked older than half the land records inside it, and a parking lot that told you exactly who had business there. Work trucks, a few sedans, nothing polished. I stepped inside carrying the folded map from the cabin and the stack of violation notices Vanessa and Dale had handed me. Different kinds of paper, same kind of pressure. The clerk's office sat behind a long counter with old wood worn smooth by decades of elbows and signatures. A woman in her 60s looked up as I approached, glasses low on her nose, expression neutral but alert. "Help you?" she asked. "Looking for property records," I said. "Name's Ethan Cole." That got a pause. Not recognition. Just the kind of hesitation people have when they're deciding how much to say. "What property?" she asked. Blackwood Tract, I replied, setting the map on the counter and unfolding it carefully. Lake parcel. Her eyes dropped to the paper, and something changed. Not surprise. Recognition. "You're Ezra Blackwood's nephew," she said. "Yes, ma'am." She leaned back slightly, studying me like she was measuring something she hadn't expected to see again. "Evelyn Carter," she said. "County records." I nodded. "Good to meet you." She didn't return it right away. Instead, she reached out and turned the map slightly, aligning it with something only she could see. "I wondered how long it would take," she said quietly. "For what?" I asked. "For someone to come in here asking the right questions." That landed. "Guess I'm late," I said. "No," she replied. "You're right on time." She disappeared into the back without another word. I stood there alone, staring at the worn surface of the counter, listening to file drawers open and close somewhere behind the wall, the kind of sound that meant things were about to become official. When she came back, she wasn't carrying a single file. She had 3. She set them down in front of me one at a time. "Deeds," she said, tapping the first. "Original and amended." "Survey records," she said, tapping the second. "And this," she tapped the third, "is everything your uncle filed with this office over the last 30 years. 30 years. That number hit harder than it should have. I opened the first file. The original deed was older than anything I'd ever held. Yellowed edges, ink that had faded but never disappeared. The date at the top read 1891, not 1872 like the railroad document I'd found, but close enough to tell the same story. Ownership, Blackwood family. Acreage, 2,400. Boundaries, clearly marked, including the lake. I flipped to the next page. Tax records. Every year. Paid, signed, verified. No gaps, no transfers, no sales, no easements. I looked up at Evelyn. "This hasn't changed?" I asked. "Not once," she said. "Not legally." That word mattered. "Then how?" I stopped, thinking about the pipe, the docks, the houses. "How is there a development using this water?" Evelyn didn't answer immediately. Instead, she opened the second file and turned it toward me. Survey maps. Modern this time. Digital overlays printed on thick paper. Lines drawn in sharp precision. She pointed to the center. "That's your property," she said. I nodded. Then she moved her finger outward. "And that," she said, "is Millbrook Estates." The development sat right up against my boundary. But that wasn't the problem. She tapped again. A thin blue line ran from the lake, cutting through my land before branching outward like veins. "That's their water system," she said. I stared at it. "You're telling me they ran that through here?" I said slowly. "Without permission?" "I'm telling you," Evelyn replied. "There's no recorded easement in this office. Not for that line. Not for any part of their infrastructure." I felt something settle into place. Not anger. Not yet. Clarity. "What about permits?" I asked. She slid the third file closer. "Read." I opened it. Letters. Filed complaints. Handwritten notes. Ezra Blackwood's name at the bottom of more pages than I could count. Dates going back decades. First polite, then firm, then angry. They're building without authorization. No easement has been granted. This is a violation of property law. I will not sign anything. Each letter told the same story. Different year, same fight. "They ignored him," I said. "They tried not to," Evelyn corrected. "They responded, sent lawyers, filed counterclaims, tried to establish shared use. Did it work? She shook her head. Not legally, she said. He never signed, never agreed, never stopped paying taxes. That matters. I leaned back slightly, letting the weight of it settle. So they just kept building anyway. Evelyn met my eyes. Yes. That answer carried more than the word itself. It meant risk, intent, confidence. They believed something would protect them, I said. Evelyn nodded once. Or they believed no one would push back hard enough to matter. That hit closer. I flipped deeper into the file. Toward the back, the letters changed, shorter, sharper. Then they stopped altogether. The last one was dated 6 months before Ezra died. I read it twice. You built your system on land you don't own. You run water you don't control. You are counting on silence. That silence ends with me. No signature, just initials. EB. I closed the file slowly. He knew, I said. Evelyn didn't answer. She didn't have to. I looked back down at the survey map, the line, the pipe, running straight through the center of everything. If there's no easement, I said, then every gallon moving through that system is crossing your property without authorization, Evelyn finished. And the water? She held my gaze. Belongs to the landowner, she said. Surface and subsurface rights, unless sold or granted. Which it wasn't. No, silence settled between us. Not empty. Loaded. So what happens now? I asked. Evelyn folded her hands on the counter. That depends, she said, on whether you plan to do what your uncle did. She let the sentence hang, or something else. I thought about the violation notices sitting back at the cabin. The pipe, the docks, Vanessa Holloway standing on my property telling me I didn't own it. Then I looked back at the map, at the line that everything depended on. They're using it, I said quietly. Yes, they've been using it for years. Yes, and they never had the right. Evelyn didn't blink. No. I nodded once. Not fast. Not emotional. Just enough to lock it in. Then I'm not going to argue with them, I said. That got her attention. No. I shook my head. I'm going to let them keep using it. Evelyn studied me for a long moment. Then, slowly, she smiled. Not big, just enough to show she understood. Your uncle would have liked that answer, she said. I folded the map back up, tucked it under my arm, and picked up the files she handed me. Because for the first time since Vanessa Holloway stepped onto my land, I wasn't the one being pushed. I was the one holding the line, and everything they'd built was already running through me. That's when I stopped reacting. No calls, no letters, no arguments. I went quiet. Back at the cabin, I spread the survey maps across the table again, this time lining them up with what I'd seen in the woods. The pipe, the junction, the docks. Every piece had a place now. Not a guess anymore. A system. I grabbed a notebook and started writing it out like a wiring diagram. Entry point, lake intake, primary line, 6-inch main through my land. Branch lines, likely splitting underground toward the development. If the map was right, and Evelyn Carter had no reason to be wrong, then everything feeding Millbrook Estates passed through that single line, which meant one thing. Control didn't start in their neighborhood. It started here. I spent the next 2 days proving it. First stop was a supply run into town. Hardware store, then a small agricultural supplier on the edge of the county. I kept it simple, nothing that would draw attention. Flow meter, pressure gauge, basic logging unit. All legal. all off the shelf. Back at the clearing, Tom showed me I worked slow, careful, not touching the line itself, just installing monitoring points at the access junction where it surfaced. If they were going to keep using my land, I was going to know exactly how much. The first reading came back within minutes. Flow steady, strong. I watched the numbers tick up, gallons per minute, converted in my head without thinking. 30,000 gallons a day, easy, maybe more. I leaned back against the concrete housing of the junction box and let that settle in. 300 homes, lawns, pools, kitchens, all of it pulling from one source, through one line. Across land they didn't own. I didn't shut it off. That would have been the obvious move, and the wrong one. Instead, I documented everything: timestamps, flow rates, pressure levels, patterns, morning spikes, evening drops, weekend surges. By the third day, I had enough data to understand how they lived. By the fourth, I understood how dependent they were. That's when Vanessa came back. This time, she didn't bring paperwork. She brought tone. Her SUV rolled in faster than before, stopping closer to the cabin like she'd already decided how this conversation was going to go. She stepped out without the folder. No introductions. No polite distance. "You haven't responded," she said, walking straight toward me. I was on the porch, sitting with the violation notices spread out beside me like they meant something. "I've been busy," I said. Her eyes flicked to the papers, then back to me. "You're past the point of delay," she said. "We expect compliance or formal response within the stated time frame." I nodded slowly. "Working on it." That answer didn't land the way she wanted. "I don't think you understand the position you're in," she said, stepping closer. "This isn't optional. These violations will escalate." "They already have," I replied. Her jaw tightened. "You're not taking this seriously." "I am," I said. "Just not the way you expected." That stopped her for a second. Not confusion. Recalibration. "Let me be clear," she said, voice sharpening. "This property, your property, is interfering with established community operations." I almost smiled. "My property is interfering with your operations," I repeated. "Yes." "That sounds like a you problem." Her expression hardened. "It becomes a county problem when compliance fails," she said. "Access restrictions can be enforced. Usage can be regulated." There it was again. Usage, not ownership. She still wasn't saying it outright, which meant she couldn't. "Out of curiosity," I said, leaning forward slightly, "how much water does your community use in a day?" That question landed wrong. I saw it in the way her eyes narrowed. "That's not relevant," she said. "Feels relevant," I replied. "If I'm interfering with it." "You're obstructing essential infrastructure," she snapped. "That's what matters." "Is it?" I asked quietly. For a second, neither of us spoke. Wind moved through the trees again, carrying the same steady sound from the lake behind me. Vanessa broke first. "You have 30 days, she said, stepping back. "After that, we move forward without your cooperation." "With what?" I asked. She didn't answer directly. Instead, she adjusted her jacket, regained her composure, and gave me the same look she had the first day, the one that said she was used to people folding. "You'll see," she said. Then she turned and walked back to her SUV. This time she didn't linger, didn't wait for a response, just drove off. I watched her go until the dust settled. Then I stood up, grabbed the notebook, and flipped to the latest entry. Flow rate had increased. Not by much, but enough. They were using more, expanding, getting comfortable. Exactly what I needed. That night, I drove back out to the junction, checked the readings again, logged the numbers. Then I followed the line further than I had before, cutting through a section of trees where the ground dipped slightly. That's where I found it. The split. The main line branched into 3 smaller ones, each heading in a different direction. Toward the development. Toward the houses I still hadn't seen clearly. Toward the people who thought this system belonged to them. I stood there in the dark, listening to the faint hum inside the pipe. Constant. Reliable. Unquestioned. And for the first time since this started, I understood the real leverage. Not the cabin, not the fines, not even the land. The dependency. They didn't just use the lake. They needed it. Every day, every hour, every gallon, and they had no legal right to any of it. I turned back toward the cabin, already running the numbers in my head. Not emotional, not reactive, just math, usage, time, value. Because if they were going to keep taking something that wasn't theirs, then I was going to let them. Right up until the moment it cost them everything. I didn't rush it. For 3 more days, I kept logging numbers, morning spikes, evening dips, weekend surges that pushed the line harder than anything else, lawns being watered, pools being topped off, people living like the source behind it was permanent, like it belonged to them. By the end of the week, I had something better than suspicion. I had proof. 34,000 gallons a day on average, sometimes higher. 300 homes pulling from a line that had never been authorized. I sat at the table in the cabin, staring at the notebook filled with timestamps and flow rates, and did the math the only way it mattered. Commercial water easement rates, access fees, back usage, interest. The numbers stacked fast, faster than anything Vanessa had tried to throw at me, which meant it was time to stop watching and start moving. I made one call. Rachel McKenna. Her number came from a contact I trusted. Someone who knew property law wasn't just paperwork, it was leverage. She answered on the second ring. McKenna. Name's Ethan Cole, I said. I need someone who understands land rights and doesn't scare easy. There was a pause. Then, that depends. What are you sitting on? I looked out the window at the lake. 2,400 acres, I said, and a water system running through it that doesn't belong there. That got her attention. How long? She asked. At least 10 years, probably more. Easement, none on record. Another pause. Longer this time. Send me everything you have, she said. Deeds, maps, data. I will, I said, but I need to know something first. What? If I'm right, if they've been pulling water across my land without permission, she didn't hesitate. Then they owe you, she said, every gallon. That was enough. Rachel drove out the next day. Black truck. No flash. No hesitation. She stepped out, took one look at the cabin, the land, the lake behind it, and didn't waste time with small talk. Show me, she said. I did. The pipe, the junction, the meters, the logs. She moved through it all like someone reading a language she already spoke, measuring distances with her eyes, checking connections, asking the kind of questions that didn't need repeating. When we got back to the cabin, she spread everything out across the table. Deeds on one side, survey maps on the other, my notebook in the middle. She tapped the map once. They built this system during expansion, she said, probably counted on no one challenging it. They were right, I said, until now. Rachel nodded. Here's the problem, she said. They don't think they're stealing. I leaned back in the chair. They know they don't own it Ownership and perception aren't the same thing, she replied. If they've been using it long enough without pushback, they start believing it's theirs. Then we change that. Her eyes met mine. That's exactly what we're going to do. She pulled out her laptop, started typing. First step, she said. We don't shut anything off. I wasn't planning to. Good, she said. Because the moment you cut access, they run to court claiming interference with essential services. I nodded. I want them using it, I said. Every day. Exactly, she replied. Because every day they use it, they owe you more. She turned the screen toward me. Numbers. Clean, structured, legal. Back usage calculation. 34,000 gallons per day. Commercial rate per 1,000 gallons. Monthly access fee. Compounded over time. I watched the total climb. 6 figures, then more. Rachel closed the laptop slowly. That's conservative, she said. We can justify higher. I shook my head. No, I said. Keep it clean. Make it defensible. She studied me for a second, then nodded. Fair market value, she said, plus retroactive use. Exactly. She leaned back. Then we send the letter. Not just to Vanessa, I said. Rachel smiled slightly. No, she agreed. To everyone. That was the move. Not private. Not quiet. Public. That night, we drafted it. Every line precise. Every number backed by data. Every claim supported by recorded documents. Ownership confirmed. Unauthorized infrastructure documented. Water usage quantified. Demand clear. Back payment due. New terms effective immediately. 500% increase in land and water access fees. 30 days to respond. Or legal enforcement begins. No threats, no emotion, just facts. By morning, the letters were printed. 300 copies. Each one addressed individually. Each one sent certified. No room for denial. No room for delay. I watched the last envelope leave the post office and felt something shift. Not tension, not anger, control. Because for the first time since Vanessa Holloway stepped onto my land, the pressure wasn't on me anymore. It was on them. It didn't take long. By late afternoon, my phone started ringing. Unknown numbers. Voicemails stacking up. Confusion, anger, panic. I think there's been a mistake. We just received a notice. What do you mean we owe? I didn't answer. Not yet. I let them talk. Let them hear themselves. Let the reality settle in without interruption. By evening, Tom Alvarez pulled into my driveway again. This time, he didn't wait in the truck. He walked straight up onto the porch. You stirred it, he said. I leaned against the rail. How bad? Tom let out a low breath. Bad enough, he said. People are talking. Whole neighborhoods lit up. Emergency meeting getting called tonight. Vanessa, she's scrambling, Tom said. Didn't see it coming. I nodded. That made sense. Because Vanessa Holloway expected resistance. What she didn't expect was a bill. Tom looked at the stack of remaining papers on the table. You really gonna charge them? He asked. I already did. He studied me for a second. Then he nodded slowly. About time someone did, he said. I looked past him toward the tree line, toward the hidden docks, toward the houses I still hadn't fully seen. 300 homes, all connected, all dependent, all suddenly realizing they didn't own what they thought they did. And for the first time since this started, they were the ones asking the question, what happens when the landowner stops staying quiet? Because the answer was already in motion. and it was coming faster than they were ready for. The first real crack didn't come from Vanessa. It came from the people she thought she controlled. By the next morning, my phone had over 40 missed calls, most of them from numbers I didn't recognize. A few voicemails had shifted from confusion to anger overnight. "You can't just charge people like this. We bought these homes with full access. This has to be a mistake." They all said the same thing, just with different voices. They believed they were entitled to something that had never been theirs. And for the first time, someone had put a price on it. I let the calls sit. Instead, I drove out toward the tree line again, stopping just short of where the path dropped toward the pipe junction. I didn't need to check the numbers anymore. I already knew what they were using. What I needed to see was them. So I kept walking, past the hidden docks, past the branch lines, far enough that the trees finally opened. Millbrook Estates wasn't subtle. 300 homes, just like Tom said. Clean lines, trimmed lawns, uniform fences, every detail controlled, and every single one of them fed by a system that ran through my land. I stood there for a minute, just watching. Then I saw the first group. 3 people near the edge of a driveway, papers in hand. My letter. I could tell by the way they held it, tight, like it might change if they looked away. They weren't talking casually. They were arguing. Good. I didn't step closer. Didn't need to. The reaction was already spreading. By the time I got back to the cabin, Tom was waiting again. This time, he didn't bother with a greeting. "She's losing control," he said. I set the keys down on the table. "How bad?" Tom shook his head. "Emergency HOA meeting last night," he said. "Packed, people yelling, nobody understands what they just got hit with." "They will. They're trying to," Tom replied. "That's the problem. The numbers make sense, that mattered, because if the numbers held, then Vanessa couldn't spin it away." "What's she telling them?" I asked. "That it's intimidation," Tom said. "That you're bluffing, that the HOA has legal coverage." "And do they?" Tom gave me a look. "You already know the answer to that." I did. "No easement," I said. "No right to the water." "Exactly." I leaned against the table. "Then what's her move?" Tom didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked over to the window, looking out toward the trees like he could see the development from here. "She's buying time," he said, "trying to keep people from panicking. That won't last." "No," Tom agreed. "It won't." There was a knock on the door before either of us could say anything else. Not loud, not aggressive, just deliberate. Tom glanced at me. "Expecting someone?" I shook my head. I opened the door. A woman stood there, late 60s, maybe early 70s, well-dressed, but not like Vanessa, less control, more strain. She held one of the letters in her hand. "I'm looking for Ethan Cole," she said. "That's me." She nodded once. "My name is Linda Carter," she said. "I live in Millbrook, house on Ridgeline Drive." I stepped aside. "Come in." She didn't. Instead, she held the letter up slightly, like it explained everything. "Is this real?" she asked. "No accusation, no anger, just a question." "Yes," I said. Her grip tightened slightly on the paper. "You're saying we've been using your land," she said carefully. "Yes." "And the water?" "Also mine." She took that in slowly. Then she looked past me, toward the lake. "You understand what this means," she said. "I do." Her eyes came back to mine. "Some of us have lived here for years," she said. "We bought these homes believing everything was legal, approved." "I know," Then why are you doing this? Tom shifted behind me, but I didn't look back. Because it wasn't legal, I said. And nobody told you that. Linda didn't respond right away. She looked down at the letter again, then back at me. Vanessa says this is a mistake, she said. That the HOA has documentation. She can bring it, I replied. I'll be here. That answer landed differently. Not aggressive, not defensive, certain. Linda nodded slowly. People are scared, she said. They don't know what happens next. That depends on your HOA, I said, and whether they tell you the truth. She studied me for a long moment. Then, finally, she stepped back. Thank you for answering, she said quietly, and she left. Tom watched her go. That's new, he said. What is? They're coming to you, he replied. Not just Vanessa. I nodded. That was the shift. Not legal. Not yet, but social. And once that started, it didn't stop. By late afternoon, 2 more people showed up. Then another. Different questions. Same realization. Nobody had seen the paperwork before. Nobody had been told about the land, or the water, or the risk. And Vanessa Holloway had built her authority on that silence. Until now. My phone buzzed again. This time I answered. Ethan Cole. Silence on the other end for a second. Then, You've caused a problem, Vanessa said. Her voice was tighter than before, less controlled. Good. Have I? I asked. You've sent unauthorized financial demands to residents, she said. That's interference. It's billing, I replied. It's harassment. It's math. She didn't like that. You're overstepping, she snapped. You don't have the authority to impose fees on a managed community. I'm not imposing anything, I said. I'm charging for use of my property. That property is part of a shared system. No, I said. It's not. Silence again, then. We're calling a formal meeting, she said. You'll attend. That wasn't a request. I'll consider it, I said. You will attend, she repeated. Bring your documentation, I said. All of it. She didn't respond. Because she couldn't, and we both knew it. The line went dead. I set the phone down slowly. Tom let out a low whistle. She's cornered, he said. Not yet, I replied. But she was getting close. Because the cracks weren't just showing anymore. They were spreading. Through every house, every lawn, every pipe running through my land. And the people living there were starting to ask the one question Vanessa couldn't answer anymore. If we don't own the water, then what exactly do we own? That question spread faster than anything I'd done. Not the letters. Not the numbers. Not even the threat of legal action. Because numbers can be argued. Paper can be ignored. But doubt? That moves on its own. By the next evening, Millbrook Estates wasn't quiet anymore. Tom called it first. They're splitting, he said over the phone. Half the neighborhood's backing Vanessa. The other half, they're not so sure anymore. That won't hold, I said. No, Tom replied. It won't. But she's not going down easy. I already knew that. Because people like Vanessa Holloway don't lose control quietly. They escalate. And that's exactly what she did. It started just after dark. I was at the table reviewing the latest flow logs Rachel had asked me to compile. Clean data, formatted for court, if it came to that, when the power cut. Not flickered, not dipped, cut. The cabin dropped into silence. No hum from the refrigerator. No overhead light. Just the faint sound of the lake outside. Steady as ever. I didn't move right away. Instead, I reached for the flashlight I'd already set on the table, clicked it on, walked to the breaker panel. Everything was in position. Nothing tripped. Which meant one thing. This wasn't inside. I stepped outside. The night air hit cold, but not empty. Something was off. Then I saw it. Down near the edge of the clearing, just past the line where my property dropped toward the pipe junction. Headlights. Low. Parked. Not moving. I didn't rush. Didn't shout. I just walked. Slow. Direct. The beam from my flashlight cut across the ground, then up toward the vehicle as I got closer. Black SUV this time. Not Vanessa's. The driver's door opened before I reached it. A man stepped out. Mid-30s, clean jacket, not local. "Evening," he said. "Evening," I replied. "You lost?" He smiled slightly. "Just checking something," he said, "on my land." That slowed him down. "Public access area," he said. "No," I said, "it's not." Silence stretched between us. Then he adjusted his stance like he'd been given instructions he didn't fully understand. "Utility concern," he said. "We received reports of interference." "From who?" He didn't answer. Didn't need to. "Tell Vanessa," I said. "If she's got a problem, she can come talk to me herself." That hit. Not hard, but enough. He nodded once, got back in the SUV, and drove off without another word. I stood there until the headlights disappeared. Then I turned back toward the cabin. The power was still out. I didn't bother checking it again. Instead, I grabbed my phone. Signal was fine. Battery was full. And the camera feed from the trail units I'd installed 2 days ago was still running. I opened the app, scrolled back. There it was, time-stamped. The SUV pulling in before the power cut. The driver stepping out, walking toward the junction line. Not touching it, just looking, then leaving. I saved the clip, uploaded it, stored it in 2 different places. Because this wasn't random. This was pressure. And pressure meant they were running out of time. The next morning, it escalated. Officially. 2 county vehicles showed up just after 8. Not Dale this time. Different inspectors, different tone, more aggressive. "We've received additional complaints," one of them said, stepping out with a folder already open. "About what?" I asked. "Unsafe conditions, potential environmental violations, unauthorized modifications to land infrastructure." I almost laughed. "Show me," I said. They did. Same pattern as before. Same kind of violations. Just louder, more urgent, more immediate. "Failure to comply may result in emergency action," the second inspector added. "Emergency," I repeated. "That's new. It's warranted." "By who?" They didn't answer. Because they couldn't. Not legally. Not clean. I stepped aside, letting them walk the property. They checked the same things Dale had, found the same results. Nothing dangerous. Nothing urgent. But they wrote it up anyway. Because that wasn't the point. The point was pressure, and it was starting to show cracks. When they left, I didn't follow them. I went back inside, opened my laptop, and started building the file Rachel had asked for. Video footage, inspection reports, violation notices, flow data, everything organized, everything connected, everything clean. By the time I was done, it wasn't just a case, it was a timeline, one that showed exactly how far Vanessa Holloway was willing to go, to protect something she didn't own. My phone rang. "Rachel, I saw the uploads," she said. "You're getting attention." "From who?" "Not just the HOA," she replied. "County's nervous. That second inspection? It's sloppy. Good. It means they're rushing, she said. And rushed mistakes are easy to prove. I leaned back in the chair. They tried to shut the power off last night, I said. I saw the footage. Think it was them? I think it was someone acting on their behalf, she said. Which is worse, because it meant intent. Document everything, she continued. No confrontation, no retaliation. Wasn't planning to. I know, she said. That's why this is working. I ended the call and sat there for a moment. The cabin was quiet again. Power restored. Lights steady. But the pressure hadn't gone away. It had just shifted. Because now it wasn't just about land, or water, or money. It was about control. And Vanessa Holloway was losing hers, one move at a time, one mistake at a time, until the only thing she had left was to push harder. And that's when people like her break. Because they forget the one rule that actually matters. The more pressure you apply, the more damage you expose. And I wasn't going anywhere. Not this time. Not ever again. The meeting was set for Thursday night. Town hall. Public. That told me everything I needed to know. Vanessa wasn't trying to contain this anymore. She was trying to control the narrative before it collapsed completely. Rachel drove in early that afternoon. No hesitation this time. No questions either. She stepped into the cabin, dropped a folder on the table, and looked at me like we were past introductions. You ready for this? She asked. I've been ready, I said. She nodded once and opened the folder. Inside was everything we'd built over the past week. Cleaned, organized, sharpened. Deeds, survey overlays, flow data logs, inspection reports, video evidence. Not just a story, a case. They're going to try 3 angles, Rachel said. Confusion, authority, and delay. I'm not giving them any of those. Good, she replied. Then we stick to facts. No emotion, no arguments, just proof. I nodded, because that's what this had always been about. Not winning louder, winning clean. By the time we arrived at the town hall, the parking lot was already full. More people than I expected. Residents, county staff, a few faces I didn't recognize, probably legal, and Vanessa Holloway. Standing near the entrance, surrounded by 2 men in suits who looked like they billed by the hour. She saw me the moment I stepped out of the truck, and for the first time since this started, she didn't walk toward me. She held her position. That told me everything I needed to know. Inside, the room was packed. Voices low but constant. Papers in hands. People standing along the walls because there weren't enough seats. Rachel and I moved to the front. Not aggressively, just directly. We didn't need attention. We already had it. The meeting started without ceremony. A county commissioner, Earl Henderson, called it to order, voice steady but tight. We're here to address the dispute between Millbrook Estates HOA and Mr. Ethan Cole, he said. No titles, no framing, just names. Good. Vanessa stepped forward first. Of course she did. She had a presentation ready, slides, printed charts, photos of the neighborhood, families, homes, lawns, normal, safe. This is a community built on good faith, she said. Residents who invested their lives into homes that were approved, developed, and maintained under established systems. Her voice was back under control, measured, professional, but I could hear the edge under it. These recent claims, she continued, are disruptive, unverified, and place unnecessary stress on hundreds of families who have done nothing wrong. Murmurs moved through the room. Not agreement, not fully, just uncertainty. That was her play. Confuse them. Frame it as instability, as overreach, as me. Rachel didn't move, didn't interrupt. She let Vanessa finish, because the more Vanessa said, the more she committed to a version of reality that couldn't hold. And we have legal grounds to challenge these claims, Vanessa added. The infrastructure in question has been in continuous use for years. The community relies on it. She stopped there, not once saying ownership, because she couldn't. Rachel stepped forward. Are you finished? She asked. Vanessa's jaw tightened slightly. Yes. Good, Rachel said. She didn't use slides, didn't use emotion. She used paper. She placed the original deed on the table in front of the commissioner. Recorded ownership, she said. Blackwood family. Continuous. Unbroken. Then the survey. Current boundary confirmation. Matches original deed. Then the overlay. Millbrook Estates infrastructure, specifically water lines, crossing directly through Mr. Cole's property. The room shifted, not loud, but noticeable, because now it wasn't abstract. It was visible. Rachel didn't stop. No recorded easement, she continued. No signed agreement. No transfer of water rights. No legal authorization for usage. Vanessa stepped forward. That's a narrow interpretation. It's the legal one, Rachel cut in. That landed harder. She turned toward the room. Every gallon of water used by Millbrook Estates is sourced through land owned by my client, she said. Without permission. Now the room reacted. Voices rising. Questions. People turning toward Vanessa. Because the thing she'd avoided saying had just been said for her. Vanessa tried to recover. These systems were approved during development. By who? Rachel asked. Vanessa hesitated. That was it. Small. But enough. Show the approval, Rachel said. Silence. Vanessa didn't have it. Because it didn't exist. Rachel stepped back slightly. Additionally, she said, we have documented usage rates over the past 7 days. She placed the logs down. Average daily consumption, 34,000 gallons, all tracked through a monitored junction located on Mr. Cole's property. Now the room wasn't just reacting. It was shifting. Because numbers don't argue. They confirm. Vanessa's composure cracked. This is an attempt to exploit technicalities. It's an attempt to enforce ownership, Rachel replied. That was the moment, the pivot, because everything after that was collapse. A voice from the crowd. Did you know about this? Another. Are we actually on his land? Then louder. Why weren't we told? Vanessa turned toward them, trying to regain control. Please, this is more complex than it appears. No, someone said. It's not. Tom Alvarez stepped forward, didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. You told people this was community-managed water, he said. Not borrowed, not temporary, not unauthorized. Vanessa didn't answer, because she couldn't answer that, without breaking everything else. Then Linda Carter stood, the same woman who came to my door. I want to see the documents, she said. The real ones. More voices followed. Agreement. Demand. And just like that, Vanessa wasn't leading the room anymore. She was standing in front of it, alone. Commissioner Henderson leaned forward. Based on the documents presented, he said, it appears Mr. Cole holds legal ownership of the land and water access in question. That was it. Official, not final, but enough. Rachel didn't smile, didn't celebrate. She just nodded once, because this wasn't the end. It was exposure. And once something like that hits the open, It doesn't go back. Vanessa stepped back slowly. No speech. No recovery. Just silence. The kind that follows when control is gone. I stood there, looking out at the room, at the people who finally saw what they'd been standing on. And for the first time since this started, nobody was questioning me anymore. They were questioning her. And that's when you know it's over. Not when the truth comes out, but when it starts asking its own questions. That's when things don't just break, they unravel. The town hall didn't end clean. It ended loud. Residents surrounded the front table, not looking at me anymore, but at Vanessa, at the two lawyers beside her, at the people who had been telling them everything was fine. Questions turned into demands. Show us the easement. Where's the approval? Why are we hearing this now? Vanessa tried to answer. At first, then less, then not at all. Because there's only so long you can talk around something before silence says more than words ever could. Commissioner Henderson stepped in before it got worse. Enough, he said. We're moving this to formal mediation, effective immediately. That word mattered. Mediation meant structure, timeline, accountability. It meant Vanessa didn't control the room anymore. It meant she had to answer in a place where answers counted. Rachel leaned in slightly. That's what we want, she said quietly. I nodded. Because this was never about chaos. It was about resolution. Clean, legal, final. Vanessa didn't look at me when she left the building. She moved fast, surrounded by her legal team, head down for the first time since I'd met her. Control was gone. Now came consequence. The next 30 days moved faster than anything before them, not because of pressure, but because of clarity. Rachel handled the legal side, structured agreements, terms, payment models, no threats, no ultimatums, just options, fair ones. Residents could purchase land access rights, structured over time, at rates lower than what they were already paying in HOA fees, or they could walk away and let the courts decide. Most didn't hesitate, because now they knew. And once you know the truth, you don't go back to pretending. Tom Alvarez was one of the first to sign. He came out to the cabin with the paperwork in hand. Never thought I'd be negotiating land access for my own house, he said. Never thought I'd be charging it, I replied. He laughed once, then signed. Others followed. Linda Carter. Then a dozen more. Then dozens. Momentum shifted fast. Because people weren't fighting anymore. They were adjusting. The real resistance came from the HOA leadership. Vanessa tried to stall, filed motions, challenged numbers, questioned methodology. Rachel dismantled each one, cleanly, because facts don't bend when they're documented. And the more Vanessa pushed, the more she exposed. Financial records surfaced, internal emails, approval shortcuts, decisions made without disclosure. One detail hit harder than the rest. Vanessa had signed off on the water system expansion knowing there was no easement, not assumed, not misunderstood, known. That changed everything, because it wasn't just negligence, it was intent. The investigation widened after that. County officials got involved, then state. Not because of me, but because once something like that surfaces, it doesn't stay contained. The HOA board voted within 2 weeks, 6-1. Vanessa Holloway removed as president, effective immediately. She didn't fight it, didn't speak, didn't show up, just disappeared from the process she'd spent years controlling. The last I heard, she was dealing with inquiries that didn't involve homeowners anymore, the kind that come with paperwork you can't ignore. 3 months later, the lake was quiet again. Not empty, just different. I stood on the dock early one morning, coffee in hand, watching the water move the same way it had the first day I got here. Nothing about it had changed. Still steady, still mine. But everything around it had. The system was still running. Same pipes, same flow, same 300 homes. But now it was legal, structured, agreed. People paid for access they understood, not something they assumed. The HOA still existed, smaller, cleaner, run by people like Tom, like Linda, people who asked questions now, people who read what they signed. The numbers worked, better than before. No inflated fees, no hidden costs. Just land, water, and the truth about both. Rachel stopped by that morning, stood beside me on the dock, looking out across the lake. "You could have taken more," she said. "I know. You had the leverage. I still do." She glanced at me. "Then why didn't you push it?" I took a sip of coffee. Thought about it. Then answered. "Because this wasn't about taking," I said. "It was about fixing." She nodded slowly. "That's rare. Shouldn't be." We stood there in silence for a while. Not the heavy kind. The kind that settles after something ends the right way. As she turned to leave, she paused. "You changed the outcome," she said. "Most people wouldn't have." "Most people don't get the chance," I replied. She gave a small smile. Then she was gone. I stayed on the dock, watched the water, listened to the quiet. Because that's what I came here for in the first place. Not the fight, not the money, not the control. Just this. And now it was mine. Fully. Finally. Not because I took it back by force, but because I proved it belonged to me all along. And sometimes, that's the only kind of victory that actually lasts.
What I learned out here is simple, but it took time to understand. If you don't know what you honor, someone else will decide it for you, not out of malice every time, but out of convenience, assumption, or silence. My uncle knew that. He didn't win his pride in his lifetime, but he kept the church in fact long enough for it to matter. And in the end, the makes on the difference. There's something steady about standing on rail that been your on along. Something that doesn't need noise or force to prove itself. Just pattern, clarity, and the willingness to see things though when it's work the easier to walk away. If you ever deal with something like this on HOA, a boundary dispute, or just someone tell you what your isn't, drop a yes in the comment or share your story. I read more of them than you think. And if you believe in the story about standing your rail the right way, no shortcuts, no pragmatism, and persistence, go ahead and surprise. There are more coming.